Assalamu alaikum. And if you are in the Northeast, like I am, the Northeast of the United States, then good evening. My name is Mubarak Ibrahim, and I am your health and happiness coach. So I am on today for a very special occasion. Today is my Oprah versary. Yes, I make up words. I have had the opportunity to have unique experiences in my lifetime, so there's really not a word for it. So I made up a word. It is called my Oprahversary. So I have two Oprahversaries, if you do not know. One Oprahversary is actually October 31st. That is the day that I physically filmed the Oprah Show on her couch being interviewed by her, but it did not air until January the 25th the following year. So I actually celebrate two Oprahversaries, which is the 31st and January 25th. And I will always consider it my Oprahversary, even when I am successful enough to have Oprah come on my show. I will probably invite her to come on October 31st, and then I will air it on January 25th in honor of the fact that we have come full circle. So, my lips to God's ears. That is the goal. All right, so every year, since I often have lots of new people that follow me and have lots of questions around like, oh, how'd you end up going over? What did y'all talk about? I just generally give kind of like a review, and I like to throw in new little facts for people who have followed me for a while, but may not know the whole story. There's always more to tell to the story. So today I thought, or this year, I thought that I'd take a little twist to it to actually add a few things that I learned about life, about business, and about business from having that opportunity. I will give you a hint. Most people think being on Oprah makes you money. It actually does not. I'm going to share with you later another opportunity that came that had nothing to do with the show. So if you are looking for exposure, I'm going to have a tip for you during this live as to what outlet you might want to actually try to pursue as opposed to being on Oprah. All right. So my name is Mubaraka Ibrahim, and if you do not know who I am and you just happen to click on this live because you're like, hey, somebody is live, I wonder what she's talking about. Well, you can find me on all platforms as Fit Muslima, and what I do is I help women to balance their hormones, lose weight, and reverse insulin resistance so they can show up as their happiest, healthiest selves for themselves, their children, and their families. Because I truly believe that the world is a better place when we are all our the healthiest version of ourselves. And if you are here, then you are now a part of the tribe, okay? You are now a tribe member, and I am your coach. So welcome. So first question. So side note, if you have any questions, I would really love to know how many people follow me that actually saw the show. Not you didn't see it, and I mean like when it aired. It's been 15 years, okay? I'm going to age myself a little bit, but it's been 15 years. But I'm still celebrating it because it was a significant part of my life. So if you saw the actual show, then put in a comment. Don't tell me you were like in middle school and make me feel old. People do that. Oh yeah, I saw you when I was in high school, and now I'm like grown with grandkids or something. Like, come on, y'all. Give me a little bit of grace. I already got young people going in my comments saying, you're the OG influencer. I'm like, is that a compliment that I'm an OG influencer? My daughter says it is. So how did I end up on Oprah? So here is the story behind the Oprah Show. So I have been a health and fitness coach for 20 going on 22 years. And I began my career by doing in-home personal training so at the time when I first became a fitness trainer, I was a stay-at-home mom. I had 4 children. I was homeschooling all of my children. And I decided that I wanted to do something for me, right? So this is often something that women go through, is that when we are in our child rearing years, oftentimes we sacrifice who we are to be mothers. And I didn't want to do that anymore. So I think I was 10 years into my marriage and I was like, I'm sacrificing everything that I am. Can I just get a little piece of me for me? And I wanted to pursue a fitness career. And so what I would do, because my kids were homeschooled, I wasn't going to just say, hey, y'all on your own, I got to go to work. What I did was I figured it out, right? So I would actually get up at 4:30 in the morning, be at a client's house at like 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m., and I would train clients from 5 in the morning until about 8:30. I knew I had to be home at 8:30 because most of the kids were up and ready for parenting by 9. Sometimes kids get up a little early. My husband was home, older siblings was home. It's okay. They needed to eat and be in their schoolwork by 9 o'clock. So between basically 5 to 8, I would take 1 or 2 clients in the morning, and then I would go home and I would be teacher, mom, nurse, everything all day long, right? And so that was actually my schedule for a few years. And I started my personal training career just by word of mouth referrals. So that's a whole business slide. One day I'll do that. If enough people want to know about starting a personal training business, just write it in the comments and I'll do a live on that if I get enough interest. So I decided after doing that for a couple of years, my clientele really picked up. And I found myself driving 30 minutes to get to a client. And so one day I told my husband, I said, it's time for all my clients to now start coming to me. All right. So I don't want to drive anymore far out to have clients. I want a physical space so they can come to me. So we found a studio space that was actually a few blocks from our house, across from the health food store. It was all inside the plaza. I was like, oh, this is perfect. And I opened up a fitness studio. So part 1 lesson in this process is sometimes you have to do things that you're not always prepared for. I never had a physical location. I never had to pay anybody rent, but I knew that this was a way for me to continue to grow in my pursuit of helping people be healthy and fit. And so we opened up a studio where I offered personal training. I continued to teach boot camp, both indoors and outdoors. I taught classes, and I had no idea how to market it. Mind you, this is like a couple of years after 9/11 tragedy happened, and people were like, even people in my family, my mom was like, are you sure that people are going to come to you? There's a lot of Islamophobia. And I was like, yep. I'm sure that there are enough people who are open-minded and reasonable who want help no matter what form it comes in, and they'll come to me. So I continued to open my studio. Opened my studio in March. So March is also my birthday month. And I opened my studio March 18th. I turned 30 on March 13th. Opened my studio on March 18th. And I started pursuing running a studio. And it was challenging. I'm not going to lie. Running a business is challenging, right? People are always like, oh, you're an overnight success. Yes, over many nights, you are a success over many nights. So how did the Oprah thing come about? So I had to give you that backstory so you kind of like have a timeline, right? So I open up my studio in March. Then September rolls around and I am trying to consume as much information about running a fitness business as I can. This is before like the internet was a big thing. It was just starting to be like, oh, you need a website kind of thing. Way before social media. So I was reading a book. I was going to the stores, getting all these books. And this one book, this author wrote, he said, what is it that makes you different from other personal trainers? And he was very clear in his inquiry. He said, don't say it's because you have this particular training. He's like, this organization gives out 100,000 trainings a year. This organization gives out 10,000 certifications a year. Your certifications and trainings is not what makes you different. What makes you different? And so I thought about it for a minute and I said, so mind you, it's September. I had opened my studio up in March. I'm trying to figure out like, how do I actually market, not just market my studio, but market a studio run by a Muslim woman, a Muslim hijabi woman, a Black Muslim hijabi woman, right? I had a whole bunch of what other people might think was obstacles, but I went forth anyway. And so it's like September and I'm like, I'm sitting home, probably it's like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like reading this book and I said to myself, I said, how many personal trainers in the United States dress like this? I'm an interesting story. Oprah likes interesting stories. I think I'll go tell her about myself. So I literally remember internet is new, right? Went to my computer, looked up the Oprah Winfrey Show, and inside of the I think it was like on a side banner, it had a click to a contact us. And inside of there, it said, suggest a story, right? And so I wrote the show a letter and I said, I'm a 30-year-old personal trainer in New Haven, Connecticut. And what makes me different is that I am an Orthodox Sunni Muslim, right? Terminologies that non-Muslims would understand. And I dress in full Islamic garb. And most people want to know if I take my scarf off when I exercise, but to find that out, you have to have me on the show. So I gave him a little teaser, right? I gave him a little teaser. So I tongue-in-cheekly say, they must wanted to know because they called me 3 days later, right? So 3 days later, I am home. And it is like 10 o'clock at night. It's definitely 10 o'clock at night. It's not like 10 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock at night. And I remember the time because my husband had just gotten up. At the time, he worked 11 p.m. shift. My husband was a police officer at the time. He's retired now. But he worked 11 p.m. shift and we were like mowing around, you know, he's getting his stuff and everything, right? And the phone rings. And it is a researcher from the Oprah Show. And she's like, hello, you know, can I speak to Mubaraka Ibrahim? My name is such and such, and I'm a researcher from the Oprah Show. And I'm like, and then she starts to apologize. Oh, I apologize. I didn't realize we were behind you in time and that it's late there. It's 10 o'clock, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you're the Oprah Show. Like, I'm not going to say, call me back. So she was being kind about it, though. And so she started asking me questions. She's like, we got your email and are you married? Do you have children? How long have you had your business? How long have you been a trainer? She began to ask me questions. And so as she's asking me these questions, she's also given me a preempt. She's like, my call does not mean that you'll be on the show. My purpose is just to get information to take back to the producers. So if the producers are interested, then one of them may call you back. And I'm like, okay. So I talked to her for probably like 15 minutes and I hang up. And of course, I'm like super excited, right? I'm super, 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 super excited. First thing I do is call my sister, all right? Call my sister Yasmin. I'm like, guess what? The Oprah Show just called me. I'm like, even if they don't have me on the show, I'm on their radar now. This is awesome. And like, you know, we're doing our girl excitement thing on the phone. Then I get a beep for somebody's calling me again. And it's the Oprah Show. And so I click. I told my sister, I got to call you back. All right. So I click over and it's the producer from the show. And she's like, oh, yeah, our researcher just talked to you. And I had a couple of more questions. So she was the nicest person. We still stay in contact to this day. And we just chatted it up like we knew each other forever. And she was asking me all about my life and, questions that most people non-Muslims have when they first meet you, like, oh, do you wear your scarf all the time? Do you pray? Do you go to the mosque? I mean, for Muslims are like, oh, why would people ask you that? But obviously she was doing research for her show, right? She wanted to, so we'll talk about this later, like they were specifically looking for a particular profile for the show. So I talked to the producer for like an hour on the phone. And it was really funny because my husband is like, who are you on the phone with at 11 o'clock at night? And I'm like covering the handle to the phone going, it's the Oprah Show. And he looks at me, he's like, stop lying. That's not Oprah. So I was like, I swear, it is, I swear. And later, he told me that he did believe me afterwards, because then he realized I was using my white girl voice. If you're Black, you get it. So apparently I was using my white girl voice. So after I talked to the producer, she was like, well, I have to take this information back to the other producers and we'll give you a call, in the next day or so if we wanted you on the show. So of course, I am staying right next to my phone. My phone is next to me all night. The next day, it's right there next to me. And she didn't call me back that night. She didn't call me back the next morning. The next morning was a Friday. How do I remember it was Friday so well? Because I told you, like at the time, all my kids were young. Fridays, we always went to Juma, and we would get up and we would start getting ready to leave out the door at about 1 o'clock. And so I remember sitting on the bed and I got up and I said, okay, guys, I yelled out to the kids. I said, start putting on your shoes and stuff because we're getting ready to go to Juma. Get ready to go out the door. And then my phone rang. And so it's Friday, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's the producer. And she's like, oh, we decided that we want you on the show and want to know if we could be there Saturday to start filming. Mind you, it's Friday at 1 p.m. And I'm like tomorrow, Saturday? And she's like, yeah, like 9 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, okay. And I hang up. And I yell to the kids, okay, change your plans, clean up. Clean up what, mommy? Everything, just clean up. So, I have 4 kids. My house was a mess. Okay. I had 4, I think at the time they were, how old was they? Okay, so my son is 21 now. So that means that he was 6? So they were 6, 8, 10, and 12. I had stair-step kids. They're all 2 years apart. So they were 6, 8, 10, and 12. And so I'm like, clean up. And so they started cleaning up. I'm like, we're going to be an Oprah Show. So I'm calling my husband. I'm calling my sisters. I'm calling everybody. And I'm like, oh my God, they're going to be here in the morning, right? Calling my husband's aunt. Like I had to let all the family know that the Oprah Show is going to be here. We're in frantic mode. I had nobody to come help me clean up, of course, because everybody lives someplace else. But me and the kids got it done. So I'm like cleaning up. And it's so funny. So here's the funny part about it is everything that did not have a place, they're like, well, mommy, where to put this? I'm like, just put it in the basement. I literally cleaned stuff out that I had put in the basement like 15 years ago, like last summer. I still had stuff in it. I was like, yeah, I remember putting this in the basement when the Oprah Show was coming. So I still have stuff in the basement 14 years later. So we're like cleaning up. And then she calls me back like mid-afternoon and she was like, I'm looking at some pictures of you on your website and I noticed that your scarf always matches your outfits. Can we look in your closet? Now, y'all know I have stuff in my closet, right? So I'm like, okay. So now I had to go and clean my closet and make that look neat so that she can see the matching hijabi outfits, right? So I was like, oh, it was so stressful. I think I was at IKEA at 9, 10 o'clock that night, trying to get little stuff to make my house look a little more organized, a little more TV ready kind of stuff. And lo and behold, 9 a.m. at 8:55, my husband looked out the window. He was like, a van just pulled up. I believe that they are here. So 9 a.m., they were there. And between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., we recorded, right? So they have 8 hours of footage somewhere, right? And that recording was a combination of sit-down interviews. I had a client actually that day, and I just, can you imagine getting a call from your trainer and saying, I know we had a session today that was supposed to be private, but would you mind if the Oprah Show filmed our session? She was so nice about it. So she was actually, so if you've seen the show, the lovely woman who I'm training, that is actually a training session that I was doing, and she was booked that day. I gave her a makeup session later too, right? So she did that favor for me by actually letting the Oprah Show film our session. So they came and we filmed for all day long from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. They filmed me and my family. They filmed interviews with me. They filmed stuff with the kids. They filmed me training a client. We were going to try to do an outdoor fitness boot camp filming, but it happened to rain that day. So that's why we actually end up opting for just the one-on-one training client. So that was like a full day of filming. So here's the timeline. I filled out the thing online probably Tuesday. They called me on a Thursday night. They called me back on a Friday afternoon. They were at my house on Saturday morning to film for the day, and they flew me and my husband to Chicago the following Tuesday. So within 1 week, I went from being this struggling fitness business owner to sitting on the couch next to Oprah Winfrey. So that was a huge, you can imagine a huge jet propellant in my life. When we were in Chicago filming the show is called 30 Something in America. If you are on social, then you've seen clips of it. If you actually saw the show when it was aired, I was not the only guest. The show was called 30 Something in America, and they profiled women throughout the United States. What was their life like in their 30s? But I had the longest segment. Yes, I did. Because I was very interesting. So, and the segment was really about just everything about my life. What was it like being Muslim? We talked about being Muslim after 9/11 and the Islamophobia and dealing with that, and, how it really changed my daily activities and how I exercise with my hijab on, how I train clients and get clients being a hijabi and surprising them sometimes, about the fact that I got married very young. I got married when I was 16. And so we talked about that. We talked about the dating process in Islam, quote unquote dating process, and that Muslims really don't date, right? That when you are talking to somebody, it is for the purpose of marriage. I think I put that clip inside of my stories. If you haven't seen my stories on Instagram, you can go over to Instagram and see those stories. And she had a genuine interest about Islam, right? And so I say that I was the most interesting of all of the guests to her because my segment was 10 minutes and 36 seconds. In fact, I was supposed to come off of stage and the next woman was supposed to be interviewed. So you go on stage and you have your solo interview and then you sit in the audience. But when the commercial came back, even though I was in the audience, she continued to ask me questions. She had more questions about Islam and about practicing and things like that. And so I kind of took half of the other woman's time because Oprah continued to ask me questions even after my interview process was over. So that was that was a great experience. So questions that people always ask, oh, is Oprah Winfrey nice? Yes, she's a very nice lady. Her personality is exactly the way that you see on TV. I did not experience any like, oh, does she act stuck up? Does she act? Nope. She's a very nice. She definitely is a great interviewer. She makes you feel comfortable, right? She complimented me on my clothes when I sat down, all of that stuff. And talking to her was literally like talking to a girlfriend, right? It was literally like talking to a girlfriend. So when we got done with the show, we went back to the hotel, and I think that night or maybe the next morning, we flew back. No, I think, did we fly back that night? No, we flew back the next day. We flew back on Wednesday, and we got home, and we just kind of wait. So here's the funny thing that I learned about the show is one of the lessons that I learned in this process is no one is successful on their own, right? We often attribute a person's success to the things that they are doing. Oprah is successful as she is because she has an entire team of absolutely amazing people behind her. Did Oprah herself personally choose me to be on the show? No, she did not. She has a wonderful team around her that makes choices based on her vision. And so getting a team around you is super important. The other thing that I thought was really, really interesting is, and to kudos to her vision and her show is that they were actually really forward thinking in terms of diversity. So here is a little inside is I didn't really pitch myself to the show or the concept to the show. I made them aware that I existed because I sent the letter, but they were actually intentionally looking for a Muslim woman to profile. And when they were looking for a Muslim woman to profile, they had actually contacted a couple Islamic organizations and a couple Islamic magazines, and the producer told me later that they had actually interviewed about 5 Muslim women before me, and no one quite fit what they were trying to show, right? Like, I guess the interest angle, right? Somebody that was doing something interesting as a Muslim woman. And so when they were in the meeting, one of the staff members said, well, we just got a message on our website from a Muslim woman. Let me go get it. And maybe she's somebody that we would want on the show. And so that is actually how I was chosen. So after they spoke to me, they were like, perfect. You're definitely the person that we want to be on the show. And so that's actually how I got chosen to be on the show. So I would love to say like, oh, pitch yourself and, give them a new novel idea. Yeah, that might work. But to be honest, the show already had the plan for what they wanted, and they already had their vision. I happened to fit in their vision, and Allah placed me in the right place at the right time in order for me to have that opportunity, right? So after the show, we were waiting for a while to actually find out when the show would air. So remember, it was airing, it was recorded in October, and then it began to air it aired in January. We actually had a false start in December. It was supposed to air in December, and then it came back and it didn't. Then they were like, oh, we have an emergency interview or something like that. I think it was a breaking case or something. And so they pushed our show back to January the 25th. So what is the lessons about after I got that much exposure? I think the first thing is, I actually did not anticipate or try to get that level of exposure, but One thing that I did and that I continue to do is always seek opportunities when the worst thing that can happen is that somebody says no. Saying no is not going to hurt you physically, mentally, spiritually, or financially. If it's not going to impact none of those things, the word no does not hurt. Always go for it, right? Always ask the question or pursue the opportunity, because no is just a word. You can take the no, take the L, or you can go back and continue to pursue it until you can change that no into a yes. Either way, it does not harm you to go for the opportunity, even if you are even if you're afraid, even if you don't know. Because I have to be honest, it was very unexpected, and I definitely cried after Fajr that morning. Like, I was like, oh Lord, I do not know why you put me in this position, because I was very much aware of the gravity of being in front of so many people in a representation of Muslim women, in a representation of Islam, the gravity of that. But when Allah has something written for you, you don't question it. You just go with it. Go with it, because He knows better than we do. The other thing that I think that is a lesson that I learned along this process is be yourself, be authentic, right? I have never, alhamdulillah, my mother raised me in a way where I have never been ashamed of being Muslim. I have never had shyness about telling people about Islam. So I'm always open to questions, even on my social media. If you are friends with my personal Facebook page, I always tell my non-Muslim friends and followers all the time, like, if you ever have any questions about Islam, then feel free to ask me. I'll go out to coffee with you and you can ask me whatever questions you want, right? So I'm always open to that, because 70% of Americans don't even know a Muslim. So I tell people, now you know a Muslim, right? So the other thing that I think that has happened since then that I think that is really interesting is a lot of people often want to know, like, oh, did this give you a lot of money? No, it did not. Oprah does not pay you to be on her show. Okay. I didn't even get a car from underneath the seat. I'm just saying. I got a t-shirt and a cup. That's what I got. A t-shirt and a cup. The other part is, I probably should have raised my prices afterwards, which I did not. So I've learned a lot of business lessons since that time. So I probably should have raised my prices, but I didn't. What it did for me is, one, of course, it gave me a lot of exposure, right? So a lot of people who didn't know that I existed and that I could speak and that I could talk about Islam and talk about fitness and talk about being a Muslim woman, they discovered me. It's funny because I have to be honest with you. I'm gonna tell you this. Before I was on the Oprah Show, I actually didn't watch Oprah that often. People think that I was like a big Oprah fan. I'm a fan now, but I'll be honest. I didn't really watch Oprah before I was on her show. Of course, I knew who she was and I knew what the show was about, and every so often, because like I was at work every day at 4 o'clock. I wasn't sitting in front of a TV to watch Oprah Show. And when I was a stay-at-home mom, I was taking care of 4 kids. I didn't have time to watch Oprah. So I didn't really watch Oprah. And so the funny thing is that I actually did not know she was as big as what she was when I was on her show. So a lot of people, when they see the show, they're like, oh, you wasn't even that nervous. One, she's an amazing interviewer. So she makes you feel super, super comfortable. Number two, I was aware that I was going to be on her show, but I was not aware of how many people watched Oprah. Like, I honestly had no idea until like the day before the show was about to air. I asked the producer, I said, so like, how many people watch Oprah on a daily basis? Mind you, this was 15 years ago. She was like 10 million, 10 million, I think it was 10. It might have been 20. 10 million people a day around the world in like 32 countries watch the Oprah Show. That is when I got nervous. That is when the nerves kicked in. The day before it was about to air. And I was like, oh, shoot, I'm about to be on TV in front of 10 million people around the world, not just the United States. That was actually when I got the most nervous. After the show aired, I got a lot of speaking engagement. So that pretty much, and I've been speaking since I was probably around 10. So anybody who knew my mother, anybody who in the Northeast who knew my mother knows that, you know, speaking about Islam and women in Islam is just something that she did. And she always used to, you know, encourage us to do it and put us in positions where we had that opportunity, whether it was teaching a class or speaking at a conference. And so I've been doing things like that. Even as a teenager, we had a program where part of my education, I was homeschooled as well, where we would, as Muslim teens, go into public schools and talk to political science classes and history classes about what exactly is Islam and how do Muslims actually live Islam in America, right? And I did that at 14, 15. So speaking wasn't a new thing for me. So I was very well adept to speaking before I was on her show. But after I was on her show, I got invited to speak a lot of places. I probably, in that first year after I was on her show, I estimate I probably spoke in maybe a dozen different states, everything from Islamic camps to conferences to masjids to all kinds of things like that. So I did a lot of speaking after her show. But if you want to know the truth about how exposure actually makes you money. So when you are looking for media exposure, so this is one of those quick little business lessons. You have to be very clear whether or not you want impact or you want money. So if you want impact and notoriety of people knowing who you are, then you might want to go and try to get on an international show like Oprah, or even a national one like The Morning Show or something like that, The View, something like that, right? But the best financial opportunities came to me when I was actually written about in the New York Times. That is where you want. I got international contracts that paid actual money when people read about me in the New York Times. And so it was probably, I would guess, like maybe 5 years later. A reporter from the New York Times contacted me and wanted to do an interview on how Muslims observe fasts during Ramadan. And the New York Times photographer came and took pictures of my boot camp. They interviewed me and they did an article for the New York Times. Well, the New York Times is read internationally by business people, by kings, by presidents, right? That is the moneymaker, right? So you want a little business tip? Get somebody to write about you in the New York Times. Because when the person who gave me the contract in Saudi, so I actually got a contract to go to Saudi Arabia to do a health and fitness summit for women. He didn't even know that I was on Oprah. Like, that was completely separate from me actually being on the Oprah Show. When I told him I was, he was like, oh, that's even better. So it actually had nothing to, and I think that I was probably most proud of myself when I got opportunities that were separate from being on the Oprah Show, because it kind of like meant that it wasn't a fluke, right? It kind of meant that it wasn't a fluke. So that is actually the moneymaker. Hint, hint. Find a writer for the New York Times and see if they can write about you. So those are kind of the lessons. I don't know if anybody have any questions. Hey, Insta people. I don't think people have questions. They were just listening. I appreciate you guys for listening. Let me know if you have any questions. So since then, what has happened with my family. So I wasn't just on the show by myself. Of course, she had my whole family on. My husband was interviewed and he actually went to Chicago with us. We left the kids home, but during the filming, they were being filmed, and you can see them in their little teeny selves and in their awkward big head stages. And so I have 3 boys and 1 girl. Back then, there were 6, 8, 10, and 12. Now they are 21, 23. Ismail just turned 26 and Sabir's about to turn 28. So they are grown people now. Alhamdulillah. Did your radio program start after Oprah? My radio program that I did start after Oprah, but that too was not associated with the show. The radio program was the brainchild of a local producer here, and who started the concept of hyper local radio. And so all of the hosts of the radio shows were local. So that actually started after. And I did that, I think, for 3 years. I stopped doing it about 2 years ago because I said I was going to start my own podcast, and I didn't. But I am this year. I am. Sadiqa said, I remember being a teen and watching that show and being so excited because I saw a Muslim hijabi on Oprah. It was so exciting. And like you said, my favorite part was that you were authentic. Alhamdulillah. Did your involvement with the White House and National Breakfast with former President Obama? So did that have something to do with the show? I'm sure it did. So that was another interesting. So when was the Obama thing? 2016. So I got invited to iftar. So it was an iftar. So I did not know this actually until the year before that iftar. Every year since President Carter, the President of the United States hosts an Ramadan iftar in the White House for Muslim American leaders. The way President Obama did it is that he did it by theme, right? And so I didn't know that until the year before I was invited. I was on Facebook and I saw a couple of people that I follow and that I know. And that was the year his theme was like Muslim Americans' contribution to sports. And he had Ibtihaj Muhammad, Belkis Abdul Qadir, and a couple of other people who were sports athletes at the White House. And I'm like, oh, how do you get invited to the White House with President Obama? I have to do this on a whole nother live of how you get invited to the White House. But that was a combination of people seeing my work and knowing who I was. So again, this is another time where that reiterates the lesson that I learned being on the Oprah Show, is that no one is successful on their own. President Obama has a whole team of people that understands his vision and they implement based on his vision, right? President Obama was really about showing diversity and making the White House open to all Americans. And the interesting thing about that was there's a committee that decides who gets invited to those, except for when Trump was president, because he didn't have them. That's not true. He had iftars, but he only had ambassadors from Muslim countries and people who had to accept his invitation if he invited them. He didn't have regular American Muslims there. He probably saved himself a lot of headache by not doing that. So with that, a committee actually decides. But this is another lesson on authenticity and being completely yourself. So when I opened my fitness studio, so that was associated probably more with being my complete authentic self and putting myself out there. When I opened my fitness studio, as I was saying earlier, I opened it at maybe 2 years after September 11th, the September 11th tragedy happened. And so there was a lot of Islamophobia in America. And my philosophy was that I was not going to run a business and people come in and be surprised by the fact that I was Muslim. I wanted people to know that I was Muslim from the time that they saw the first ad, so that they would not be surprised when they walked inside of my studio door and they're like, where's the trainer, right? And so I actually put my face in full hijab on everything. I did postcards and I mailed it out to like 1,000 people at a time in the city with my face on them. Because my philosophy is, for people who did not mind that I was a Muslim woman and they were more attracted to the fact that I got my clients results and that I was well educated inside of health and wellness, they would come to me. For anybody who was Islamic phobic and didn't want to deal with Muslims, they need to know right up front so they didn't even have to cross my doorstep. So that was my philosophy. And so I probably did a little extra. I could be extra sometimes, I was a little extra. So I actually ran full billboards throughout my city with my face on it. So it was like a 20-foot Mubarakah. And I also had, I believe, 8 buses completely wrapped with a picture of me telling this, come to boot camp. So I was very well known and am very well known in the city of New Haven. And how do I know that that was associated with my invitation to the White House? That was associated. This is how I found out. I found out it was associated to my invitation to the White House because, for people who don't know, I live in New Haven, Connecticut, which is also where Yale University is located. And when I went to the White House, I was in one particular meeting and they asked for everybody to go around the table to introduce themselves. It was myself and I think only about 8 other Muslim American leaders got invited to that particular meeting. And as we were introducing ourselves, when it became my turn, one of the gentlemen who worked for the White House, and I can't remember offhand what department he was the head of, he says, before I could introduce myself, I was like, my name is Mubarakah. He interrupts me and says, I remember you when I was a student at Yale University because I saw your billboards and buses everywhere. I was like, thank you very much. Marketing works. So he remembered my face because he saw it in 20-foot 3D everywhere in the city. So that is really about being yourself, being authentic, being unapologetic about who you are. Being Muslim does not make you, obviously, we know that it doesn't make you less qualified, less educated, less worthy. But sometimes Muslim women can create this perception for themselves of how people view them. And I have this philosophy. It may sound weird, but hear me out. I act like I don't have on hijab. All right? Hear me out. So this is my philosophy. So if you're having a hard time with your confidence around wearing hijab, hear me out. Sometimes we project, right? Watch too much news, people saying all kind of Islamic phobia things like that, and you think that people are looking at your hijab. But they might just be looking at you because you got a booger hanging out your nose. I'm just saying, did you check? I'm just saying, all right? So my philosophy is I'm going to pretend like I don't look different than you. If we are talking about politics, let's engage in a very thoughtful, respectful discussion about politics. If we are talking about health and wellness, let's engage in a practical, science-based conversation about health and wellness, right? I don't make an assumption that people are looking at me at any type of way because I have on hijab. I'm like, I don't pay it no attention, so I'm going to assume you're not paying it no attention and you're listening to the words that's coming out of my mouth. And that is how you can be your full authentic self, no matter how you decide to dress. Just pretend like you don't have on a hijab. I'm not saying take your hijab off. Listen to the previous part of the video if you just logged on, all right? What I'm saying is don't make assumptions that people are looking at you a particular type of way because you have on hijab. Be yourself, be authentic, be as smart as you want to be as sassy as you want to be as funny as you want to be who you are, and let your personality and your character speak to who you are. And the fact that you have on hijab it's just an afterthought. So that's my philosophy. And that's how you go forth in life with confidence as a Muslim woman, is stop focusing on the fact that everybody know you're a Muslim woman. People know you're a Muslim woman. Sort of kind of like being black. Maybe black women can relate, right? Yes, there is racism out there. Yes, there is Islamophobia out there. It is not always my first thought as to why somebody gave me a no, why they're looking at me, why, right? So I'm gonna first check, make sure I don't got no boogers hanging on my nose. Then I'm gonna make sure my clothes is right. Then I'm looking all right, right? So I'm gonna give you about 5 to 6 excuses before I call you Islamophobic or before I call you racist. So, right? I'm gonna give you about 5 or 6. I'm gonna check 5 or 6 things first. And then if all that's straight, okay. Now maybe it's the hijab. Maybe it's this, that, right? But don't go to that first, because most of the time it's not that first, right? So most of the time it's something else. So maybe you actually wasn't qualified. I'm just saying. Look at your credentials and what you was asking for. Okay. So that is really how I go forward with confidence. It is my pretend like I don't have on hijab. And I'm going to be the best version of myself, whether it is a business self, whether it's a coaching self, whether it is an advice self, whether it is a marketing self. I'm going to be the best version of that I can possibly be, in spite of and despite the fact that I am dressed in hijab. That is my philosophy. All right. Yes, Huda said she is an Arab woman and she can relate. Yep. You go forth and you be your full, authentic self. Wa alaikum salams to everyone who gave me salams along the way. All right. That's all I got for you today. All right. So that is the story and the lessons that I got about being on Oprah. And maybe I will come back next week and I will tell you about my experience of having dinner with President Barack Obama and how I still did not eat the lamb. I'm sorry. I couldn't eat the lamb. I was having dinner with the president, and that's how much that I don't like the taste of lamb. I couldn't even eat lamb with the president. All right. Maybe next time. All right. You guys have an awesome rest of your night. It is almost 8 p.m. here. And you know, I'm stretching it by doing my evening thing here. I normally do morning lives, but feel free to share this, to follow. We have good stuff coming up. All right. Assalamu alaikum. I didn't